Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome. All right, in the same room again. Megan's here with me. Glad to have everybody with us. We are a week until the bar exam. That is hard to believe. I never thought we'd get here, but here we are, and we are glad you're with us. We're going to be taking some time today to answer your questions. We're also going to have a little pep talk at the end. We want to make sure that we're giving you enough time to get your studies in. So we're going to be pretty efficient today, right?
Yeah, I think the first question is, I wanted to ask if there's a file or video that talks about the possible essay subjects being tested for July 2021.
Yes, there is. I did those on July 10th. So they are in your video playlist for every state. So if you go to your state course and go to videos, the very first video there will be a July 2021 preview video. And again, I think we've got some other questions about these preview videos coming up, but you'll see them there. They're about 30 minutes in length, and it will cover your state exam. I will say there's nothing to preview for the multi-state. Nothing changed. We didn't update it. So if you want to see the multi-state preview, it's from a couple years ago because literally nothing's changed, but it's in the multi-state module.
Great. Yeah, another question about the preview videos. Someone said they wanted to watch your older preview videos in order to see how accurate they were so that I can focus more on those and not spend so much time on the rest.
Oh, sure. That's what they say. We just want to see how. I don't know. Most of them were pretty accurate. I did pretty good the last couple of years. Now, I have to say the whole fall thing was crazy. But really, that's not a good use of your time right now. Figuring out if I am accurate or inaccurate, who cares? The real point is you should not be basing your study on what's in that video. You should be basing your study right now on what is the most difficult, hardest subjects for you. Where can you get the most points in the 6 days that we have remaining? And that means going to your least comfortable subjects and working there. Even if I have said, you know what, that subject's not going to be on the exam, that's still where you should spend your time. I think it's the most important way to be studying right now, not based on what I'm doing. So we've removed those old videos, removed them after every exam, not because I'm worried about people checking up on my accuracy, but because it's just not useful for you.
Definitely. All right. I had a question in the chat box. For the OPEs, if we're getting higher than a 60, does that mean we will pass? And this person did several of them.
And they wanted to know if that means that
if we're getting higher than a 60, does that mean we'll pass?
Out of 100 questions, it depends on the jurisdiction. It's a good sign for sure. I talked about that and what those benchmarks should be. But here's how you would calculate it yourself. Take your score on those first 100 questions and multiply it by 2. So in this case, it was 60 correct. Mm-hmm. Take that 60, multiply by 2, it's 120. Now you'd have to add a scale to that, and typically you'd add about a 15-point bump to that score. So the 120 will now jump to a 135. Now you have to compare that to your state's exam. A 135 is passing in a lot of jurisdictions, but not every jurisdiction. So if you're in California, where you need a 139, that's the number you're shooting for. That's at least the goal. In Florida, your goal is 136. In New York, it's 133, and 135 in Georgia and Texas. So just to give you some random numbers. The other thing, though, that I would point out about these numbers is that they are benchmarks. They are not absolutes. We see people who score far below that number in practice who pass the bar exam. And we also see people who score above the number and fail the exam. It's a good way for you to get a sense of where you are, but don't feel like, oh, I've got it in the bag, I don't have to do anything, or I'm never going to make it, I'm not getting a big enough score or high enough score. Basically use those questions to help you learn. I'm going to say it again. Go to the things that you didn't do well on that exam and drill down there. That's where you're going to gain points and use it that way. But if your scores are consistently coming in at 60 or better, you should be feeling pretty good about how you're doing. That's a good benchmark number in my view. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I just want to say, because I talked with a lot of students this week who said, okay, great, I'm doing all these different MPE tests, whether it's 100 questions or the 200 ones, and almost all of them, they're hitting their benchmark or higher, they're getting these great scores, and then they take one and it just doesn't go that well. and they don't do very well. And then they're taking that, and I understand the impulse, taking that one poor performance and thinking, that's it. I thought I could do the MBE, but clearly I'm going to fail the MBE. And should I even take the July test? And so please don't panic right now. And I say I've just seen this from several students this week. So if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. You're not the only one feeling that way. But definitely don't panic. Don't take it. Don't throw out all of the good work that you've done and assume that must be the error instead of, oh, hey, I took one test. Maybe you were tired. Maybe it was, in some cases, it was a really old test that's not terribly predictive. Things like that. And so the questions are really different nowadays. Whatever it is, but no matter what, learn from what you did. Go back, check all your answers, try and understand what you did wrong, and you won't make that mistake again. But certainly don't panic and throw out all of the good work you've been doing because you get one test that just doesn't come in quite what you were looking for. Next is, what is the weight of the essays in the overall exam scoring?
It depends on the jurisdiction. Do we know what jurisdiction this? Okay, so that's a UBE student, and it depends on, it's 50% basically, because all the points add up equally in the UBE. So this is one of those interesting things to me at the end. It doesn't really matter what the points are, okay? It's whose line is it anyway? The lines are all made up and the points don't matter anyway. None of that matters. Right now, it's a task avoidance question, because what happens is we think, maybe I should be doing this more or doing this more. Don't do that. Do what we told you to do. It all counts equally. Every point you get on the UBE counts the same. Now, if you're in Florida, you could pass just the Florida part or just the multi-state part. Maybe it makes a difference. Maybe it makes a difference if you're in California, where you got to get your multi-state score high enough to get your essays read carefully, or in Georgia, where you got to get a certain MBE score where your essays aren't read at all. But in general, don't try to outthink or overthink the exam, right?
Yeah, don't game it. I cringe when, I'm not saying this student was doing it, but when people say, I know that really the MBE is the most important part, so I'm just going to really only focus on the MBE, and then I'm not going to worry about the MPT, for instance. I hear that a lot, that people are like, the MPT is not worth anything anyway, so who cares? I don't need to practice those. Absolutely not. Because conversely, you'll also hear people who say, I know that the MEEs, the essays, are really the important part, and I don't really have to worry about the rest. So yeah, so definitely don't try to game the system. You want to do well on every single piece. And what I always tell students is we just don't want to leave any room for those examiners to fail you. So you just do your absolute best on every single part. Be prepared for every single part. And then they don't have any choice but to pass you at the end of the day.
Yeah, the other thing about this, and I'm glad the student asked this question because I think it reflects what a lot of people are doing, to be honest. I think there's so much anxiety sometimes. We want to control something. So we just ask these questions that are control questions. Oh, is it this? How about this? What about this? What about that? And the truth is, at the end, none of that matters. And so you've got to get your head into the game of the exam and just being as prepared as you can be to do what you have to do, and let the scoring and the inside bar exam stuff stay where it is. And we geek out on it. We love those kinds of things, but really at this point, that's not what you need to worry about.
Yeah, definitely. All right, great. Let's talk about some study strategy questions next. I just completed all my assignments for the substantive portion of the syllabus. I believe I need to pivot or modify the remainder course syllabus as I will not have enough time to complete the remaining portion. What assignments or modification of schedule would you advise me to do for the next few days leading into the bar exam?
I said, work on your weakest subjects. Don't feel like you've got to cover everything or do everything. And certainly don't feel like within a particular subject you've got to study everything. If you've got bar maps, use bar maps, because bar maps lets you get to the specific part of the subject that you're having trouble with and focus and do a deeper dive there. I think that's one really important tool. I think when it comes to review at the end, on the multi-state side, doing either the February 91 or the 2006 200 question OPE is really all I would suggest doing. The other questions are there just for practice, in my view, at this point. When it comes to essays, I'm not a big fan of writing a ton of essays here at the end. I would say if you did a couple a day, that's a lot, right? Maybe you get in one more performance test between now and the exam, definitely not more than two, and that you start to tail off a little bit when we get to the weekend. Saturday is really the last big day of study, in my view. And Sunday's kind of a winding it down, and Monday is definitely a chill day. Getting to bed on time and doing some photo reading and doing light review, but not studying hard. And my daily emails will be saying those things to you as well. So if you're getting those daily emails, make sure you're reading them. I get a lot of feedback about them, a lot of great responses. Part of what I try to do, particularly in this last week, is to be fairly explicit about what I want people to be doing at the end so that they're not wasting their time.
Yeah.
You have any?
Yeah, what I encourage everyone to do, actually, this is even if you have been through the whole study guide, is that I really say for the essay writing at the end that you should probably still be writing an essay a day, unless it's a day where you're doing a performance test or something like that. But what I suggest is that you take your subjects that you are feeling the weakest in, and you go through different essays with that in a much more compressed time frame.
Yeah.
So you read through, you outline it. So I want you to type out your outline. Hey, what are my conflicts? What are the questions I have to answer? And then under each one, you do your conflict pairs, which is just a note. It's just a notation, right? Yeah. It's not a whole sentence. It's just give like a little conflict pair. And you may want to jot down basically what's the basic law that we're talking about. So you might have like man, hearsay, woman, business records exception, just something really simple. And then what you're going to do is in your own head, and sometimes I suggest say it out loud to yourself, talk through it. Say, okay, problem on this conflict. Here's what I think man would say this, and here's, let me explain what the hearsay rule is to myself, and then I think woman would say this, and then here's the business records exception. And then, okay, here's what I think that woman's going to win because it's the business record exception, and here's why it's a business record exception. But you're just saying it out loud.
Yeah.
So then you go through an essay in like less than 10 minutes, and then you spend time checking it and seeing, okay, did I understand? Did I catch all of the conflicts? Did I understand what the conflicts really were? Did I catch the law that the examiners were looking for me to be talking about on this problem? Do I understand the law? And if not, let me go back into the outline. Let me do a little bit of a deeper dive. So I suggest that for everyone, but certainly if you're feeling behind, I think it's a great way to practice the essays and the skills that come along with doing the essays without spending a half an hour plus the checking time, or in California, Florida, an hour and the checking time, Georgia, 45 minutes.
I think it's a great idea. Again, working in your weak areas.
Mm-hmm, definitely. All right. Marva just asked a question. Would it be of value to redo the 2006 OPE or the February 91 MBE?
No, absolutely not. Look at what you missed and then use the mixed practice data bank and do questions from there. That's the best group of questions in my view at the end, and just work on those. And if you find that you've got a particular weakness, let's say evidence, you're having problems, go to the evidence question banks, question 1 to 240 or whatever it is, and just start working through some of those. I think that's more valuable. Doing full-length tests really fatigues people. We saw in the Access Lex study that doing more than one full-length test was not correlated to better performance. So we're going to take that advice, and we've felt that way for a while, and we're going to use that and stay with it and say don't do more than one of those tests, and use this weekend to recover, right? It's not the weekend yet, but if you haven't done a test yet, hey, Thursday, Friday, Saturday are all good days to do a test. But if you've done them, you're done, and move on to just doing your practice.
Definitely. All right. Next is a question about, this is really interesting, someone who struggles with a lot of the MBE questions because they feel sort of emotional responses to what's happening, to the fact that I think we see this a lot in the essays as well, where you feel very strongly for one side or the other, and you just feel like, oh, how could I possibly come up with a winning solution for this one party? So the student was saying, how do I keep neutral and take myself out of it?
Boy, it's a fabulous. If I go back 20, 25 years ago, this was not a problem. This didn't come up, but we've become politicized as a society, and everything in our discourse is politicized today. Even simple things like wearing a mask is politicized, right? And so when we see these bar questions, it's hard to go from being political in every other aspect of our life to being apolitical on the bar exam. We've had some essay questions, in particular in Florida, that are jaw-droppingly tone deaf.
It's really political. Really blatantly political.
Really, yeah, like, are you kidding me? And you got to stop at that moment, and you got to be aware. I think all you can do is stop and say, okay, I know what's happening here. The examiners are trying to pull some emotional strings. They're trying to perhaps distract me with this. Perhaps they're trying to get me to lean towards a result that might not be really what the law says. And I would just take a moment, take a breath, as always. The solution to almost every problem on the bar exam is to stop and breathe. If you do that and just stop for a minute and say, okay. And then remember that in the writing style, we're writing arguments on both sides of the dispute. So we're making the arguments for both sides. And then I don't think it really matters that much who you select, as long as you can explain your reasoning. Now, on the multi-state, if you're using selective intuition, you should be able to avoid a lot of that, because it's the answer choices that send you down the rabbit hole, right? That give you the distractors. And if you've made your choice before you look at the answer choices, A, B, C, and D, you're less likely to be sucked into that, even if the question, the fact pattern, feels more political or more sensitive to you. But just try and take yourself out of it. Be a neutral.
Yes, definitely. And I do think it's good practice for being an actual attorney, because it's going to happen that you are going to have clients that you don't agree with, or you would not be friends with, but that doesn't matter. You are their attorney, and you owe them good advocacy on their behalf. And I do think it is good practice, but I know that is a difficult thing. It was really funny. I was going through a common law question with a student yesterday, actually, and it was like pretty much exactly what just happened in where I'm from. The city next to me in Anaheim, there was like a big sort of blow up about a political rally that was planned, and then the city canceled it because they were concerned. They didn't agree with the political speech, and they were concerned about counter protests and it creating a safety hazard. And this question was from the 90s, this common law question. So it does go to show that there's always an undercurrent with these things, but certainly just, I think, because our climate is so tense right now, it can create situations where questions that felt more neutral in the past feel very. Are you trying to make a political statement with this, even though there's nothing inherently political on either side about what they're saying? Yeah, it is a funny thing that I'm sure as you guys have practiced, you've come across questions where you were like, was this written in 2020? Because it feels very much of the moment.
We're going to talk at the end about what I call the 4 agreements, and I'll talk about that specifically. There's a connection there. Okay.
All right. Next couple of questions are people who are not feeling super awesome right now for the exam. So if this is you, know that you're not alone, all right? Okay, so first, I like how this person started. This is one of those panic emails.
Yeah. Good to know, good to have self-awareness.
Yeah. For the past 2 weeks, I've been reviewing my 3 weakest subjects. Good job. I've done all the practice questions for all the subjects.
Yeah.
This week, I've been doing more practice essays in non-MBE subjects.
Okay.
I haven't done a practice exam yet and was wondering if I should. So let's stop there and answer that first.
Yeah, I think it's useful to do one practice exam. I just think to give you the reassurance that you're okay if you are. And there's enough runway right now that if you do one of those tests and you find that you've got some weak areas, this isn't going to be you're not going to be weak across 7 subjects. You're going to be weak in some specific areas. Then go ahead and do the deep dive in those specific areas, and then you can feel better and go on to the other things. So that's my answer is yes, do a practice test for sure.
Yeah. And then their other part is that they do feel more prepared and confident right now than they did before they took it the last time, but they don't want to overextend this week. So how can they avoid that?
Yeah, I think what happens is make a really strong push Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week. If you've got 8 hours of study time available, do 8 hours, right? 3, 3, and 2. If you don't, cut it back appropriately. But make a big push and then start scaling back Saturday and Sunday and taking some self-care, taking some time. I highly recommend Peter Rabbit too. I will avoid giving you the.
If they don't have kids, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. It's a great stupid movie, right? So anyway, find your own stupid movie. Whatever, right? But do something that's a little bit of self-care for yourself. But don't try to push harder. I think that's the point, is that so often we think more work at the end is going to be beneficial when in fact it's counterintuitive. Less work at the end and saving yourself for the exam is actually better.
Definitely. All right, there's a couple of questions in the chat box I want to turn to.
Okay.
At what point do you start studying after the July exam, depending on how you feel at 5:05 p.m. Eastern Standard on 7/28?
Okay. We're going to talk about that. But in general, I think what happens is you take a little bit of time to decompress, right? That postmortem moment is tough. And I'm going to create, I have what I call 10-minute, which I will be doing right after the exam. You can schedule and do a 10-minute debrief with me. And it's actually good to just get it out of your system, to flush it out.
Because your family doesn't want to hear every minute detail about, can you believe that con law essay? And can you, and oh my goodness, I don't think I gave the right standard. And they'll nod and smile politely. But
so take a little bit of time. I think that at least a few weeks before you dive back in. Now, I will say, we do not cut off your course access. So if you are crazy enough to want to jump right in at 5:05, you could. We're not ever trying to control that for you. But we think in general, you want to just back off of that a little bit. And of course, coming into this week, that's terrible thinking.
Do not be thinking about, oh good, I'll start studying again on Thursday night.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, you definitely want to go in right now feeling like I'm going to take it and I'm going to feel awesome about it.
Yeah.
And I also want to caution people to not catastrophize because I know I feel like I tell this story every time, but I think it's really important that I will never forget getting on the elevator at the hotel after I finished the California bar and standing in that elevator with a bunch of guys who were talking about one of the essays and just listing off the 13 different things that they put into the essay and I'm gonna talk about this and that and that, and having almost a panic attack because I was thinking in my head, I don't know these guys, I'm thinking in my head, I didn't talk about those things, I didn't see like that, what are they talking about? So honestly, let yourself get caught up in thinking that the way your friend who took the bar took it is exactly the way that you needed to or you didn't pass. I have no idea if any of those guys passed or not. And I have no idea if they were just blustering or not. Probably blustering a little bit. Make sure, that's why I say talk to Jackson, because you don't want to go and talk to other friends who took the bar necessarily. You don't want to talk to people who just don't really know anything about the bar. It's good to talk to somebody who has a little bit of a perspective on it for you. And then another question in the chat, could you remind us where to find the video or file containing the tips for MBE answer selecting? So for example, when you're not sure if two answers are identical, but for one element, is it likely one of those is the answer, etc.?
Yeah, it's the Selective Intuition video, and it's in your multi-state module. Under the videos, you'll see Selective Intuition and how to use your intuition for multiple choice. There's also a paid webinar called Photo Reading for the MBE that gets into that a bit as well. And then I sent out an email to our students this week where I had a brief excerpt of a student call that we did where a student went through and did Selective Intuition. And to her surprise, it all worked. And that's a very cool little short 10-minute video. I will say I've been doing that exercise with students over the last couple of weeks. I did one last night with a student who did 3 questions in a row, had been telling me that she just couldn't get the answer. And she used the process. I walked her through it and she got all 3. And she was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Yeah, that's where you'll find it. And of course, if you're totally lost, you can always send June an email and she'll help you find it as well.
Yes, definitely. All right, and then this is a question that I have heard this from a few people this week. So again, I just like to let people know, you're not alone if you're feeling this way, because there's multiple people saying this. Take solace in that everything's going to be okay. Whatever you're going through, it's not unique, and we're here for you. All right, so this student said, I'm feeling terrible. I just finished the February 91 exam. My score was 100 out of 200. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I'll tell you what breaks my heart about it is not the score. The student finished by saying, I'm so sorry. Sorry for what? Yeah. Sorry that you are making an effort to do something that's so difficult and so big and so challenging, and that you have nothing to be sorry for. You just take that number, and it's just a number, as you said earlier, and you start working on the things you missed, and everything that you can fix is a point that you're going to gain. You use the techniques that we've talked about, and you are a genius. You've got all of that information. You just have to trust that you've got it. And so the worst thing that can happen, and I think this was just in that moment the student felt really discouraged, and I understand that discouragement, but don't let that define you. That is not what this is about. You just keep working, you keep getting better, you keep getting after it. I've had students who have been with me for off and on more than 20 years before they passed, but they passed. And I've had students who have had every conceivable challenge thrown into their life, and they passed. It doesn't happen always in your time and your way. And I'm not saying that this student won't pass. They could very well pass, but it's too early to give up and to throw in the towel. And if you're watching, stay with us till the very end here. I've got a video that I think is going to help you.
All right. With that, let's move into kind of this final week. We have 6 days to go. What is it that you want people to be focused on, to be feeling and thinking as they're going into this last week?
Yeah. So much of what we've said is not new. We've been talking about all these things all along, about working on your weaknesses, about believing in yourself, about recognizing your inner genius. I am a big fan of a book by a man named Don Miguel Ruiz. It's called The 4 Agreements. And I thought that the 4 Agreements would be a good way to wrap up everything that we've been talking about in this last week. It's a context or a framework for where I think a bar taker should be. If you're familiar with the book, great. If you're not, very briefly, Ruiz talks about the ancient Toltec religion and the 4 agreements that they incorporated into their society that I think we can use today. And the first of the agreements that I think is so valuable is it says your word is impeccable. I don't know, is impeccable is a weird word, isn't it? Does it mean perfect? It means without sin. And essentially what he's saying is your word matters. The words that you use right now matter. When you say I'm a failure, or I'm sorry, or I can't do it, or I'm not good enough, or the test is too hard, you are calling into existence that part of the universe. And I think that makes a difference. I think the language we use is important. I know when you're talking to your kids, you're affirming them, aren't you? Mm-hmm. You're telling them, you're great, you can do this, keep trying, don't give up. I think for a bar taker at this point, you need to be very careful with your words over this next week. It is easy to get discouraged. Don't do that. Be positive about what you're doing. Recognize how far you've come. Are you doing better today than when you started the course? I would say yes. Either. So you've done better. You've learned. You graduated law school. Maybe you practiced law in another country. All of those things make you a better person. And so for that, your words should be of gratitude. They should be, I'm excited that I get to go show what I've learned and I can prove what I can do. It's my chance to be my very best. So that's the first agreement, make your word impeccable. The second agreement is it's not about you. Don't make it personal. When we were talking about those bar questions, right? Sometimes it feels so personal. What are they doing? What are they asking? This has got to be something to attack me right now. They know this is a hot button for me. It is not. The bar examiners don't know you. They don't care about you one way or the other. It is not personal. They are not trying to keep you individually out of the bar exam. I know it feels that way sometimes. And if you're in a state like Florida with their character and fitness, oh my gosh, it feels personal. But it is not personal, I assure you. And don't make it personal. If things go not according to plan on Tuesday and Wednesday because of tech, or you're traveling and you're at the test site or whatever it might be, things don't go well, or the proctors seem to be hassling you, it is not personal. Don't personalize it. Let it go. Brush it off. I've been yelled at by some fairly significant Supreme Court judges. And it feels personal, but don't do it. It's not personal. It's just the position and it's the circumstance. So don't personalize anything this week. If people around your family make comments, or I'll be glad when you stop studying, don't take that personally. They're just reacting to their world. They miss you. They want you back in their world. It'll all be done in a week. Don't personalize it. Have you noticed how many fights happened in families this last weekend, right? Yeah.
A lot of people are on the live wire right now. Like you're just a little, exactly. So just not take things like, oh gosh, everybody's out to get me. You're fine.
So second agreement is don't make it personal. The third agreement I love, don't make assumptions. Oh my gosh, this last week, people make so many assumptions. They make assumptions about the technology and then they get surprised, right? Oh, I assumed that everything would be fine with Exemplifier, that they wouldn't update their software. Or you should assume, if you're going to make an assumption, make the assumption that they're going to change something. But you should be absolutely clear that to not make any assumptions. Be literal about things. Look at the results. Look at the rules. Don't assume you have a ticket to the bar exam. Make sure you've got it. Don't assume your hotel has internet. Confirm it, right? Don't assume that everybody's going to be leaving you alone on test day. Make sure they've got someplace to go, right? Do those things. Don't make assumptions. So this weekend's a good time to eliminate your assumptions, right? Don't assume that you've got everything ready to go. Make sure it's all there. Don't assume anything at this point. And I think that's just a good, solid piece, right? So easy one. And then the final agreement is my very favorite of all four. It's do your best. Just do your best. Your best today will be different than your best was yesterday, and your best is tomorrow. And each of us will have bests that we feel like, man, I'm on it. My best today was top of the group. And then we'll have days when our best is, not so good. But don't beat yourself up about it, right? It's you do your best and then forgive yourself. And so for the bar exam, the goal is not that you've got to go in and pass. The goal is you've got to do your best. Mm-hmm. That's all we're asking you to do. We are not asking you to hit a specific number or target. We're asking you to do your best. And if you go in with that mindset that I'm just going to do my best, no matter what comes at me, but I'm going to do the best I can do, and then I'm going to leave it. When the exam is done, I'm going to leave it. And the day after, on Thursday, I'm going to do my best. And that's all we're trying to do. If you can get that agreement about doing your best, then you are really so far ahead of the curve here. And that's just so important. So the book is called The Four Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz, I highly recommend it to you for your after the bar reading. But there's the short Cliff Notes version. Did I get it?
No.
We have great confidence in you. We expect great things from you. Do your best this week. Do your best at the exam. We will be here through the test, available. If you've got any questions or concerns, reach out to us. Thank you, Megan. This has been a really long run for us. We started back in January of 2020. Pretty much went nonstop because of the unusual nature of last year. And so we've never had a run of 18 months like this ever. And we know for you, it's been much the same. So thank you all. It's been wonderful to have you with us. We are looking forward to great things. And when you're ready to go into the exam on Tuesday, okay? We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great test. And thanks.
Best of luck, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.